Force versus violence. We need to understand that these concepts are complete opposites of each other. They are not the same. The terms should never be used interchangeably with each other, because not only are they not even remotely similar, they're direct, diametrically opposed opposites. Let's look at the difference. They're often spoken about as if they're the same, and they're used interchangeably, when in fact they are actually diametrically opposed to each other. Force, the definition of force, is the capacity to do work or cause physical change in the physical world. Okay? For any change to be created in the physical world in any capacity, force must be used and applied. There's nothing you can do that doesn't require force if you're going to make a change happen in the physical. Okay? So, to set up this equipment, force was required. We had to lift it, we had to set it up, we had to plug in the cables. Force is required to do all those things. It's the capacity to perform physical activity, physical work. Okay? Action, force is actually action which is in harmony with morality and natural law, because the taking of it, the usage of it, doesn't violate rights of other people. So as soon as you're stepping over the line into coercive usage of force, that becomes violence. The initiation of force for coercive reasons, for coercive applications, becomes violence. That's what makes it violence. Force itself is not violence. As such, force is action which one always possesses the natural right to take, and this includes the defense, the physical defense of someone's person, their body, against the act of violence. Force may be applied in that situation. When you are accosted with violence, you do reserve the right to use physical force defensively against such an assault. Violence, on the other hand, and this is the key to keep in mind with violence, it is the immoral initiation of physical power to coerce, compel, or restrain unrightfully. No one has the right to ever enact violence, because violence is always starting it. Initiation, that's the key word there. It's the immoral, the unrightful initiation. So, teachers in schools will, if there's a skirmish that happens between a couple of male students one day, they'll say, it doesn't matter who started it. All that matters is who started it. All that matters is who started it. All that matters. Because the person who actually conducted violence is the person who struck first. They initiated the immoral use of physical behavior, of physical force, physical power to coerce, compel, or restrain. Therefore, when the person beats back that physical assault with force, they have not committed an additional wrongdoing. Okay? It's difficult for many people to understand who are in right brain imbalance. They don't want to acknowledge that you maintain the natural right to use force when you are accosted with violent behavior. If someone just came up to me on the street and started swinging, okay, because they want something I have, or just because they don't like the look of me for whatever reason, they don't have the right to do that. If I replied by beating back their attack with sufficient force to put that action down, how many wrongdoings would have been committed? One. Correct. One. Not two. One. Because I maintain the right to defend myself with physical power, with physical force when necessary, when violence, meaning someone else started the immoral behavior. That's what matters, the initiation. Who started it is all that matters. All that matters. And again, it's a very difficult thing for the ego to comprehend. The ego doesn't want to hear that. It's been conditioned so long that responding with force is also violence. We are verbally and mentally equating these two things, and when in fact they are actual complete opposites. Okay, if a kid got hit by somebody else in a school, and then that other kid maybe even said once, stop what you're doing, and then when the other kid wouldn't stop, he punched him and knocked him out. Okay, I would ask other people, who struck first? And if the kid lying on the floor struck first, I'd say you got what you deserved. That's it. Because that person had a right to defend themselves. You had no right to strike him. You initiated the violence. He responded with defensive force. Many people don't want to hear that because they're very conditioned. And I'm not saying you have to do that. You also reserve the right not to do that. But the right does exist. Both rights exist. You would have the right to not respond with physical force, but you would have the right to respond with physical force. See, that's a free will decision that the person has the right to choose between those actions. I don't even look at either one of them as the high road. You know? Personally, I think if somebody keeps beating somebody and keeps conducting violence to them, and the other person keeps accepting it and never rebels against it and never uses any force to put it down, I almost look at that as the low road. I'm not a pacifist. Not a pacifist. Okay? I am 100% about non-violence, meaning don't initiate harm to other people. Don't start it. Don't start none, won't be none. In street lingo. That's how it really is. Okay? But if somebody else starts it, they're asking to be put down with the amount of physical force that is required to put down the act of aggression. Violence is coercive action. See, that's the key. It's always coercion. Saying, you're going to do what I want you to do, or then I'm going to strike. Then I'm going to commit the act of violence. It's coercive. It's action which is always in opposition to morality and natural law for the very reason that it involves the violation of others' rights. That's why it's called violence. It's a violation. The act of violation it resulted in violence. Your rights have been violated. That's why it's called violence. It's the same root word. Violence is action which one never possesses the right to take, ever. There is no such thing as the right to commit violence. Doesn't exist. Because violence is the immoral initiation of physical power to compel, coerce, restrain, which no one has the right to do. No, you don't have the right, no one does have the right to initiate that type of action. Force, on the other hand, there is a time and a place to exert that force in a defensive capacity. All right, so we'll talk about that here. This piece of trash comes up to somebody on the street and says, give me everything that's valuable. I want your shoes. Oh, they're leather? Take them off. Take the wallet out, all the jewelry. Give me your purse. Give me your wallet. Okay? It's called a thug. Nobody would believe he has the authority or the right to do that, and we would have the moral obligation to obey this criminal. You know, if the criminal started calling himself government, we might start believing it. Right? But let's say somebody on the street saw what was being done, took out their own 9mm and blew this guy away. How many acts of violence were committed? One.
They would look at it like that.
But what I understand. But again, that's somebody saying, I prefer not to see it that way. Well, again, perception and reality do not really align in many cases. They're not the same. That person is incorrectly perceiving what is. They're not seeing the truth. And many people don't want to hear that that's the truth because they're very conditioned and they are very well-behaved slaves. You know, as harsh as that is to say. They don't want to understand that the inherent right to use force against violence exists and is always our right. Always. Now, I'm not telling you go out and immediately do that either because the perception is so screwed up in the body of humanity that the majority of people don't believe that would be a right. And they'll persecute you for doing it. You see, the self-defense principle is continuously being eroded. Human beings possess the natural right to defend themselves from violence with defensive physical force. A person who is accosted by violence possesses the right to stop the person who is conducting the violence from continuing to do harm to them with any amount of force that is necessary to stop the attack or the assault, okay, up to and including deadly force. I would say, if you want to be nice about it, give the person one verbal warning to stop. Say no once. After that, it's on. That's it. And that's really my policy. Okay? That would be my policy on the street with an individual. The problem is here, the so-called authorities of the government like you say, don't want to see it that way, and they're constantly trying to take this right away from somebody. They're constantly trying to say, no, we own the monopoly on the usage of force, and all you may do is wait and be accosted and assaulted until one of us shows up. Well, you know what that's called? It's called a big crock of bullshit, is what that's called. And it shouldn't be accepted by anyone who has any common sense. Shouldn't be accepted by anyone. Unfortunately, again, like I said, people are very, very well conditioned. And they think that this is an example of two wrongs don't make a right. There's no two wrongs committed there. There's one wrong committed, and then there's a right that is being exercised. Big difference between exercising a right that involves the defensive use of force and committing a wrongdoing which involves the initiation of violence. And people got to get clear on this. They have to get clear on it. So the question becomes, does violence magically become a right when it's conducted by government? When they shut down people's free speech rights and assembly rights? Or when they conduct direct theft from people through what's this euphemized form of slavery called taxation? And like I said, I'm not asking you to accept or believe taxation is slavery. I'm telling you, if you don't understand that, you're wrong. I don't care what you think. I'm telling you it is that way in truth and in reality. Taxation, slavery. Shutting down of people's rights is slavery. Telling people what they may or may not put in their body is slavery. It's not my perception. That's what is. Okay? And that's what we're accepting as a people. We're accepting that. These people have no more right to do it than any other individual would. And this concept brings us to the way I try to define and explain to people what real spiritual enlightenment is. Because what the New Age community is telling you that an enlightened being looks like is equally as a big crock of bull of what people who don't understand self-defense, the self-defense principle, believe. Okay? Enlightenment is not what this New Age nonsense community is trying to tell people that it is. All right? It's not about not taking action and sitting under a tree and meditating until you're magically enlightened. Okay? Enlightenment means knowing what's going on around you. Enlightenment means knowing what's going on within you. Enlightenment means truly knowing the true objective difference between right and wrong and living that in your life on a daily basis. Enlightenment means not aggressing upon your fellow human beings, but not agreeing voluntarily to be aggressed upon by them either. Okay? There's two pillars, two dynamics that go hand in hand with real enlightenment. I call this the two pillars of enlightenment. Okay? So here they are. The first pillar is the sacred feminine principle. This has been called the non-aggression principle. All right? It is the simple law of don't engage in violence. Or, quite simply put, don't steal. Don't steal. We talked about that. That's what all spiritual law can be boiled down to. Don't steal from other people. Don't take what isn't yours. Don't take life that isn't yours. Don't take property that isn't yours. Don't take rights that aren't yours. They're the property of others. Respect their ownership. Okay? Most people can grasp this pretty readily. Okay? And even in the New Age movement, they grasp this. In other words, don't immorally initiate non-rightful use of physical power to coerce, constrain, or compel the rightful physical behavior or free will choice of another sentient being. Respect other people's free will, their rights, their property, their life, period. Real simple. It's the golden rule. Don't do things to other people that you don't want done to you. I always state it in the apophatic, in the negative. It's much more powerful that way. But there is a second principle, a second pillar or tenet of enlightenment, if you will. This is the sacred masculine principle. This is what religions of the world, whether they be government, organized religion of different regions of the world and cultures, the New Age movement, all right, this is what they want, they are seeking to suppress. Because religions are right brain modalities. They're right brain methods of mind control. Just like government, who thinks it's a monopoly on the physical use of force, that's a left brain imbalanced mindset. All right? The second pillar of enlightenment is the sacred masculine principle, which is also known as the self-defense principle. Your body's your property, you have a right to defend it when it comes under attack by violence. This principle states, sentient beings have the inherent right to use force to defend themselves from violence conducted upon them by another. This is the part many people don't get. You know, that's why we're not rebelling against our slave keepers, our slave masters, who are masters of other people in their own sick, distorted, psychopathic minds, and are nothing but thugs and criminals, that people magically believe have the moral authority to continue to do what they're doing, just because they euphemize slavery and call it government now. That's the sacred masculine principle. There is no such thing as an enlightened being that doesn't fully grasp both of these principles. Anywhere. Never has been. There's no such thing as half measures. You got to get them fully, both, or you're not there. And that's the problem. We're not all the way there. If people were already there, they wouldn't be tolerating what we're putting up with. More aggression against people's rights is being conducted in this country than when the founders of this nation actually separated from England. And they would have been horrified. I tell people, look, not to get nasty, but I tell people, if the founders of this country could magically come back to life somehow and see what's going on in this country, they'd take a piss on people. That's what they would do. That's how much disrespect they would have for what we're putting up with. You know? Again, just to say it the way it really is. That's what they would want to do to us. Because they would tell us, we warn you about all this. We warn you about it all. And you know what you did? You ignored it. Ignored it. So what did all those people who died in that revolution die for? We have to understand true ownership. Real, deeply. Not peripherally. Super deeply. We got to know what we own and what we don't own. We have to understand, why is this our current condition? That's the question we asked at the beginning. And here's the reason. The reason our species continues to experience a systematic and growing loss of freedom is because we collectively do not deeply understand ownership, and we continue to commit and condone theft. This is a prison for thieves. That's what Earth is. It's a prison for people that don't want to respect ownership. They want to take things that aren't theirs. And that's what we're here to learn. We're here to learn that there's only one natural law. Stop stealing from other people. Stop taking things that you don't own. Stop condoning theft of things that other people don't own. Don't condone that activity, that behavior either. So what is ownership? What's the definition? What does it entail? To own a thing means that regarding that thing, an individual maintains three basic things regarding it. The first is rightful possession. It means you acquired it without doing harm to somebody else. So you rightfully own it, lawfully own it. Okay? You're in possession of it. You have it in your possession. It is yours. The second thing is you control its usage. Okay? So your house, you control its usage. Your car, you control its usage. Your clothes, you control their usage. My computer is mine. I control its usage. I'm using it. Okay? Control of the usage of something means that you own it. And most of all, maintaining personal responsibility for that possession is the third aspect of ownership. So to own something means I'm in lawful, rightful possession of it. I control the usage of that thing, and I maintain personal responsibility for it. All right? And this is what we have to understand. Natural law can be essentially reduced to one single spiritual law. I gave you the working definition, the soundbite definition before. Here's the super simplified two-word concrescence of all of this information. Natural law gets boiled down to two words. Don't steal. That's it. You want the key out of the prison? You got to understand property. You got to understand all rights are property rights. Stop taking the property of other beings. Stop condoning the taking of the property of other beings. The end. To say, so we put them together, to say the law. Jurisdiction literally means to say the law. I'll say what the law is, and then it will magically be that way. You know? That's why they call themselves authorities. Author. Author. What does an author do? They write things. See? So in your mind, you're thinking they make things right. They make the rights. See? That's how mind control works, through words. And people never see it because they never stop to even break down the word or consider where it came from. Whenever you're hearing or seeing the word authority, you're seeing the word author, which in your mind you equate with writing something. W-R-I-T-I-N-G, writing. But phonetically, that is the same as writing. R-I-G-H-T-I-N-G, writing something, making it right. And the mind doesn't separate those concepts at a subconscious level. Okay? Hence is why they call themselves authorities, writers. And that is what they do. They write down the law. They call themselves legislators. I write down what the law is, and then it magically becomes so, on my whim or preference. And you know what that's called? I've said it before, and I'll say it again. It's called claiming to be God, is what that's called. Authority is nothing more than an illusion that only exists in people who are mentally ill. If you believe in authority, there's disease within the human psyche. Period. I don't care who's offended by that, get as offended about it as you want. Authority exists only in a diseased mind, because the concept is based entirely in violence and built upon the erroneous and dogmatic belief system that some people are masters who have the moral right to issue arbitrarily chosen commands that they call their laws, and other people are the slaves of that ruling class who have some sort of a moral obligation to obey the master class. And we call this authority. You know what I call it? I call it what it really is, slavery. It's called slavery. It always has been slavery, it is slavery now, and it always will be slavery. Let's stop euphemizing things. Let's call bullshit for what it is, okay? There's no inherent legitimacy to the concept of slavery, and never has been, and never will be. And we need to understand that's what that is. Authority is slavery, but we're just euphemizing it and calling it something different. Authority is the belief in the legitimacy of authority is the belief in the legitimacy of slavery. If you believe in authority, you have legitimized the concept of slavery. All believers in authority, all, blanket statement, ego hates blanket statements. All believers in authority are believers in slavery and supporters of it. 100%. Always have been throughout the entire time that the universe has existed, and always will be for as long as the universe exists. Blanket statement. Authority is nothing more than the idea that man can become God and through jurisdiction dictate the law. That's man wanting to be the creator of the universe and decide for himself what right and wrong actually are, instead of discovering those laws of nature that the creator has put into effect. It's the same old story, folks. It goes back for tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years. There's nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new here. It's the same story of slavery that's been going on since this species has existed on this planet. It was just called different things throughout time. You know, we had the old world order. It used to be called kingship. Kingship, the sovereign on the throne. Yeah, we still have kings and queens in certain countries. The unimaginable, unmitigated gall. Somebody calling themselves a king over other people. They're my subjects. I mean, you have to be joking. this concept that authority is vested in one. That person is the representative of God on the planet. You know? Has anything changed? Or have we just said, we've taken this old world, quote, order, you know, I put order in quotations because it can't result in order. It's actually the ancient slavery chaos system. Both of these things. And nothing has changed. Okay? The so-called old world order, nothing of the kind. The old world chaos. Now we have the new world chaos. They call it the New World Order. Well, I put new in quotes here and order in quotes because there's nothing new about it and there's nothing orderly about it. It's the old world chaos, the old world slavery. It just has a different name. We've wrapped it up in a more attractive package. Oh, I see, we have diffused the authority. Now, it's not just vested in one person because people would realize the inherent bullshit in that. It's now vested in a few people that call themselves government. We've taken the same magic, the thing that doesn't actually exist, this magical thing that is based in violence and coercion, and we've just diffused it, you know? We've diffused it through now several people have that magic, okay? I mean, it can't get any more nonsensical, illogical, ridiculous, and immoral. And yet people still believe in it. This is their religion. It's their religion. It's their slavery, is what it is, okay? Because it doesn't make a difference. Authority vested in one, authority vested in few, it's the same thing. Slavery. And being awake means knowing that definitively, deeply. There's only one true divide that exists in humanity. All the other things that supposedly separate us are divide and conquer strategies. Race, ostensible religion, background, social status, amount of money people make, how people dress, how people talk, what people look like. Divide and conquer. All divide and conquer strategies. Age, sex. It's all just ways of dividing people so that they're easier to conquer and rule. But there is one legitimate difference, and it has to do with the level of consciousness that people are at. And again, consciousness meaning the demystified concept of consciousness that I talked about in the first section, the ability to recognize patterns and meaning with respect to what's taking place within you and around you in your environment. That's it. So how much are you aware of the pattern? How much of the truth are you actually taking in and processing accurately and understanding? That's what I'm talking about by a different level of consciousness. There's only one true division in humanity that separates us into two distinct types of individuals. And that the criterion for that divide, for that difference, is whether or not an individual believes in authority and therefore believes that there is legitimacy to slavery or not. That's it. That's the only real difference between human beings. And this is what it looks like, the one true divide. The statist or the anarchist. And I searched for some memes on social networking to find, you know, a good image that represents the general concept of the statist and the anarchist. You know, you could find 1 million of them for statists. You'll just look at any police brutality image, and there's billions of them online. But you know, I took this kind of funny cartoon meme that says statism is the brilliant idea that we give a small group of people the right to kidnap, imprison, harass, steal from, and kill people so that we can be protected from the people who kidnap, harass, steal from, and kill people. It makes so much logical sense, don't you think? I love the statist argument that we need to be protected from ourselves because human nature is fundamentally bad. So we're going to put the concept of authority into the hands of people whose nature is fundamentally bad to protect us from ourselves because we're fundamentally bad. Wonderful, flawless logic, as you can readily see. Flawless logic. Flawless logic. And it goes back to that worldview schism. That schism about how do you view human nature as well. The human nature schism. Are we inherently good and wonderful beings or inherently flawed and evil demonic beings? When in the truth of the matter is, we're neither. Those two conditions are just that, conditions. They're not our nature. Our nature is that we are programmable such that we can become either of those extremes, if we're programmed well or badly. So when I was looking for an image to represent anarchy and anarchists, I didn't see any good ones, because they give you these utterly ridiculous concepts of anarchists are people that are all about creating chaos and damage in society. Okay? You look up anarchy on Google Images, anarchist on Google Images, you'll get the so-called black bloc, these children that are nothing but communists in disguise, okay, who think that communism is anarchy, all right, because they've read the absolutely polluted writings of Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, etc., okay, and advocate, yeah, well, let's take everything, give all resources into the hands of the state. We'll magically be free then. And then they think anybody who disagrees with them is a dyed-in-the-wool, crony capitalist that believes money is the solution to everything, and human greed should see no bounds, That's why people have a hard time with my work. I don't believe in any of it. I'm out of the mind control, out, 100% out. All of those systems do nothing but lead to control and slavery. Okay? And that's what other people need to get out. Out is the answer. Out is the solution. Get to the outside of that so you can see it from the outside for what it is. Something that destroys human innovation, creativity, freedom, love, etc. That's all those systems do. That's all they ever have done. So when I was looking for an image to represent a real anarchist, I didn't want to be too egotistical and just put my face up there, or some of my other friends who are also real anarchists. I saw this meme on Facebook and I said, yeah, that's it. Christ, the ultimate spiritual warrior, the ultimate anarchist. And again, please don't fill up my inbox saying, don't you know all about astrotheology? I could write books on astrotheology. I probably may even do that in the future, okay? I get it's allegorical. I get there is doubts to the historicity of the actual historical figure, and I don't care, because it's the message that matters. Who is Christ warring against? He was warring against the established religious institutions of his time, the Pharisees and Sadducees. Okay? When he put out works that went against their so-called law, okay, there was a big uprising against his word. Then the banks of the day became involved, because when he went to the temples and they were charging ridiculous interest rates on temple coins, preventing people who actually wanted to go to the temple and worship, they couldn't. So then he freaked out in the temple and turned all the bankers against him. And then who ultimately did the crucifixion? The state, the Roman Empire, which was the police and military of his day. And people in the actual religion who say they're into the scriptures can't even read them and see the institutions that this being was warring against was religion, money, and government. They can't even see that when it's right out in the open in their face. And these are the things they put up on a pedestal. It's a joke, and they're fake-ass Christians. Okay? It's called looking at the exoteric, the outside, and never getting into the deep, fundamental, core, spiritual, and moral truths that lie at the center. Because they're too concerned about all the trappings, So the ultimate anarchist is right there. And what I'm here today to tell you is that there is no such thing as an awake being that has ever been a statist. Never one. Every truly awake being that has ever existed in the cosmos is an anarchist. And can never not be one who is an anarchist. One who believes that there is no such thing as the legitimacy of ruling and owning other people. Because that's what an anarchist is. Someone who believes there is no legitimacy to the external rulership or ownership of other people, or in other words, that there is no legitimacy to slavery. That's what anarchy really is. And I'm going to explain that right now. Okay, a statist is an individual who erroneously believes that there is such a thing as authority vested in certain human beings, magically giving them the right to rule over other people. Without euphemism, if we stop euphemizing things and we're honest with ourselves,